Welcome everyone to the Converting Fractions, Decimals, and Percents tutorial. We are actually going to focus on fractions and decimals in this tutorial. And in the future tutorial, we will hit percents, but in my class, we are only focusing on fractions and decimals, but we introduce percents. So I hope this tutorial helps. My name is Ms. Gillum, if you do not have me as a teacher. Thank you for watching my video. I hope it helps you. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns that I can help with. So the first thing I want to look at is the triangle relationship that is between fractions, decimals, and percents. So you must understand that the triangle works in all directions, that I can go from a fraction to a percent, and I can also go from a percent to a fraction. Okay, I also can go from a percent to a decimal, but I can also go backwards from a decimal to a percent. And then finally, I can go from a decimal to a fraction, or I can go from a fraction to a decimal. And when you do this, you are creating equivalent forms of that number. You are not creating a different value, you're just showing me a different way to create that form. So for example, if we're going from fractions to percents, there are two different ways that you can work the problem. You can change a fraction, so the numerator, the denominator, make the denominator so it's out of 100, because every percent is out of 100, and you would change your numerator to be the same. But if I was going from a percent to a fraction, we would just write the percent out of 100 and put the percent on top, and then it becomes a fraction. If I was going from a percent to a decimal, we talked about how we can divide a percent by 100, or when you divide by 100, it causes you to move the decimal. So let's say I had 5%, you would move twice to the left to make it a decimal, and it's no longer a percent. And then to go from a decimal to a percent, you are going to multiply by 100 to make it a percent. So if I had if I had 3 hundredths times that by 100 means I have 3%, which, if you notice, moves your decimal twice to the right. And next, to go from a fraction to a decimal, you can either have your numerator and denominator and make it out of tenths or a hundredths. So it has to be a place value, and when that doesn't work, we can divide the numerator by the denominator and it will create a decimal. And to go from a decimal to a fraction, we look at the place value, and whatever place value it's in is where the fraction will be over. So if you have like 4 tenths, that would be 4 tenths. So I want you to take a second and just look. I know there was a lot of writing on the screen, but take a second and take it in. This is in your notes if you are in my class. If not, feel free to pause and write this down. But we're going to do some examples next. In today's lesson, we are not going to focus on percents. Like I said, that is our next unit. We are going to focus on fractions and decimals, but I wanted you to see how all of these three are in a relationship together. Okay, before we can get started converting fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions and to percents, we need to understand place value. So on the left of the decimal, you have your whole numbers. You have a ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. But I want you to notice, if you go from ones to the right, it's the same thing except for it's adding a THS, which gives you that decimal place value. So this is the tenths place. This is the hundredths place, thousands place, 10,000s place. And this will tell us what type of fraction it would be. So a tenths would be out of 10. A hundredths is out of 100. Thousands is out of 1,000s. And 10,000s is out of 10,000s. So we must know place value to be able to do the example problems. So let's try an example problem next. So let's start with the easy number that we probably already know the decimal form of this fraction, but just so you can see the different ways that you can work it out. So let's try 3/4. So if I wanted to change this to a decimal, so we're going to go from fraction to a decimal. We can work this out two different ways. You can make an equivalent form out of 10 or 100. So I have to think, 4 times something would give me 10, or should I just go to 100? So we're going to go to 100 because 4 doesn't go evenly into 10. So what times 4 gives me 100? Well, if you think about quarters, it's 25. So you do the same thing to the numerator, and that gives me 75. So that would be 75 hundredths. And you would write that as 75 hundredths because this is the hundredths place. Okay, if you couldn't do it that way or you forget how to do it that way, you can also think of every fraction is a division problem. This tells me 3 divided by 4. So we're going to do 3 divided by 4. The numerator goes on the in, so this starts with an n. Numerator goes on the inside. So 4 can't go into 3. It goes in there 0 times. So we're going to add a 0 and bring that decimal up. 4 goes into 30, however, 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Subtract that, you get 2. Add another 0. And 4 goes into 20 5 times. Okay, so that tells me, and you can stop once you have 0, or you notice it's repeating, that it would be 75 hundredths. Okay, I would like you to pause the video and try this problem on your own, changing it to a decimal. So we are going from fraction to decimal. Okay, welcome back. I hope you've finished the video and you are ready to go over it. So there are two different ways you could have done this problem. You could have changed 5 to be a 10 or a hundredths, depending which version you want to do. It doesn't matter. You'll end up with the same answer. To get from 5 to 10, you would multiply by 2. So you would need to also do this to the numerator, which will give me 8. So it's 8 tenths. And if you think about your place value, you have 8 tenths. It's in the tenths place. If you went to 100, you multiplied by 20, which gives you 80. Or you could have said, I have 80 hundredths, which means the exact same thing. You could have also taken your 4/5 and did the dividing. Remember, the numerator goes on the inside because the numerator starts with letter N. Add your decimal because 5 cannot go into 4, so bring that 0 up, bring your decimal up. 5 will go into 40 8 times, which is 40. And you have the 8 tenths that you got on doing it by scaling up. So then you have some problems that are like 7/8. And these numbers, 8 does not go evenly into 10 or 100. And these are the ones that you actually have to do the dividing. So once again, numerator goes on the inside. Your elementary teachers lied to you if they told you that the bigger number always goes on the inside. That is not true. When you are dividing fractions, it is not always the biggest number. So it's the numerator. And then we have the 8. So 8 cannot go into 7, so I'm going to put a 0 on top. I'm going to add a decimal, bring that decimal up, and add another 0. 8 will go into 70, however, 8 times, which is 64. Subtract, you are left with 6, add a 0, bring it down. 8 will go into 60 7 times, which is 56. Subtract that, you get 4, add another 0, bring it down. You keep going until it either repeats or terminates. 8 will go into 40 5 times exactly. So this one would be 875 thousandths. Now let's look at doing decimals to fractions. So if I had, let's say, this number, you have to think about the place value. What place value is a 3 in? Well, if we go back to our slides a couple of slides ago, we know the number after the decimal is the tenths place. So this would be 3 tenths. Now let's say it had a 0 there. You look at the last place value. This now is in the tenths, hundredths. So this would be 3 hundredths. Okay, if it was 0.003, you look, this is tenths, hundredths, so now this one is in the thousandths. So this would be 3 thousandths. Okay, that is how you do a decimal to a fraction. It's no trick, you just have to understand place value. Okay, let's do 2 more examples together. So let's say I had this number. And you think about how you read the number. You don't read it 0.12 or 0.12. You read it 12 hundredths because it's in the hundredths place. So 12 hundredths would be 12 hundredths. You could simplify this by dividing it by a form of 1 of 4 fourths, which gives me 12 times 4 gives me 3, or divided by 4, sorry, and 100 divided by 4 gives me 25. So my final answer, if it asks you to simplify, is 3/25. You may also come into contact with a problem like this. So 6.8 is the incorrect way to read it, so we read it as 6 and 8 tenths, because it's in the tenths place. So you write a whole 6 and 8 tenths, and then simplify if needed. So 2 will go into both of them. So this would be 4 fifths. So 6 and 4 fifths would be your final answer. Okay, I would like you to pause the video and try this problem on your own. Okay, welcome back if you have finished this problem. So there are 2 different ways you could have looked at this problem. You could have looked and said the 0 doesn't matter and taken it off and changed it to this number. Or you might have left the 0 on and looked at the place value. So remember, tenths, thousand, or hundredths, thousandths. So this could be 650 thousandths. Or if you simplified it first, you could have had 65, and this is tenths, hundredths. Either way, you'll still get the same answer. Because if you divide this by 10 and this by 10, you would have 65 hundredths. But this can be simplified. 5 can go into both of these. 5 goes into 100 20 times. 5 goes into 65 13 times. And that would be in simplest form. Okay, why don't you try this problem next? Okay, I hope you paused the video and now you're ready to try this problem. So this is 5 wholes and it is in the tenths place, so it is 2 tenths. Or if you simplified it, it is 5 and 1